Montana, November. Sky bruised purple over 60 frozen acres, and on a gravel road cutting through all of it, a single truck slows to a stop. Inside, a woman who has not been home in 10 years stares at a farmhouse that should be in ruins. It isn't. Warm light spills from windows she remembers boarded shut, a new fence. Smoke from a chimney she watched crumble as a girl. Everything she left to die has been brought back to life by hands that are not hers. She steps out, bad leg, one good ear, 8 titanium screws holding together a body that an IED in Syria tried to take apart. In her jacket, a county document that says her family's land now belongs to a stranger. The front door opens, a silhouette, a woman, and the unmistakable sound of a shotgun chambering a shell. But the gun is not the danger here. The danger is buried in the soil, a man who died on this land 11 years ago, a father who carried a secret to his grave, a receipt hidden inside a wall waiting a decade for the one person who would come looking. 2 women, 1 porch. 2 families bound together by a death neither of them caused, and somewhere between them the truth is about to claw its way out of the ground. The document was dated June 14, 2019 at the top. Gallatin County tax deed transfer at the bottom. Judge Harlan Price's signature, neat, confident, the signature of a man who had never once doubted himself. In the middle, 3 words that rewrote everything. Owner presumed unreachable. Mara Calloway was not unreachable. She was in Kandahar running a night patrol with 4 other people whose names she will not forget as long as she draws breath. Sergeant DeLuca on her left, Kowalski on her right, kind of dark that has weight to it. The kind of silence signs that breathes. Nobody called, nobody asked, nobody checked. 3 words on a county document. 10 years of her family's soil changed hands while she was bleeding for a country that apparently couldn't be bothered to verify whether she was alive before selling the ground beneath her feet. She found out on a Tuesday, not from a phone call, not from a letter, from a forwarded email that had bounced through 3 different military addresses before landing in her inbox at Ramstein Air Base. 6 weeks after a pressure plate IED outside Deir ez-Zor had thrown her through a concrete wall, rearranged the architecture of her right femur, 8 titanium screws, 40% of the hearing in her left ear, simply gone, not damaged, gone. Like it had packed a bag and decided it was done. She read the email 3 times, then she stared at the ceiling for a long time. Then she asked the nurse for more painkillers, not because of the leg, because of 3 words, owner presumed unreachable. She had been very reachable. She had been reachable every single day for 10 years. She had just been reachable in places where people were actively trying to kill her, which apparently was close enough to unreachable for the county of Gallatin, Montana, to sell her family's land to a stranger. Fine, she would deal with it when she got out. Except getting out took 11 months, and dealing with it turned out to be more complicated than she had anticipated. Which was how Mara Calloway found herself driving 4 hours from Billings in a truck with 1 working heater, heading toward a farm that was no longer hers, toward a truth she didn't yet know she was looking for. The F-250 was older than her last deployment, rust along the wheel wells, a crack in the passenger mirror she kept meaning to fix. The heater worked on the left side only, which meant the left half of her body was warm and the right half was Montana in November, which was not warm, not even close. She didn't turn on the radio. Her left ear made static unbearable now, not painful exactly, more like someone dragging a thumbnail along the inside of her skull. So she drove in silence 4 hours from Billings, through Livingston, through the valley, past the place where the mountains open up like a jaw and the sky goes in every direction at once. That specific Montana thing, that feeling of being very small and somehow completely held at the same time, she had forgotten that feeling. 10 years in places where the sky meant something tactical, threat or no threat, cover or no cover. She had stopped seeing it as something beautiful and started seeing it as something to read. Montana gave the feeling back without asking permission. She gripped the wheel harder, her right thigh ached, low and constant. The kind of pain you stop noticing until you notice it and then you can't stop. Physical therapist at Ramstein had given her a timeline, 6 months to functional mobility, 12 to full weight bearing. Mara had been functional in 4. She had not told him that. She had simply stopped going to appointments. She didn't have time for timelines other people made for her body. County Road 9 came up on her left. She turned without slowing down. The gravel hit the undercarriage like applause. She knew this road. She had ridden her bike down this road at age 9 and fallen off and gotten back on and not told her father. She had driven down this road at 17 with a duffel bag in the back seat and not looked in the rearview mirror because looking back would have meant stopping. She had not been back since 10 years, a decade of other people's emergencies, other people's wars. Other people's crises at 3:00 in the morning in places that didn't appear on civilian maps. And now home, whatever home was going to mean. First thing she saw was the mailbox, not her father's mailbox. Her father's mailbox had been a leaning aluminum tube on a rusted post. The flag permanently stuck in the up position since 2009 because nobody had fixed it. She used to walk past it every morning as a kid and think, someday I'll fix that flag. She never did. The new mailbox was cedar, hand-carved. The post, straight and solid, burned into the wood in careful letters. Holt Family Farm. Mara stopped the truck, engine running. She sat and looked at those 3 words for a long time. Holt Family Farm, not Callaway, not Oak Ridge Farm. Which was what her grandfather had called it, and what her father had called it, and what she had called it every time anyone asked where she was from. 6 syllables. The answer she had given 10 years of her life trying to deserve to say again, Holt Family Farm. 3 words that meant someone else lived here now. Someone else had planted those fence posts. The white timber fence running the perimeter of the east pasture, straight and new and not a single board warped. Someone else had rebuilt the barn. The old barn, the one she had watched lean further south every winter, the one her father had propped with a salvaged telephone pole and called it good enough, was gone. In its place stood something barn red and deliberate. Tin roof catching the last of the November light, and the house Mara had expected ruins. She had driven 4 hours mentally preparing herself for ruins, for the roof caved in, for the windows gone, for the specific grief of watching a place you loved collapse into itself while you weren't looking. She had been shaping that grief since Ramstein, getting it ready to carry. She had not prepared for this. The wraparound porch was whole, not just repaired, transformed. New boards sanded smooth, stained dark, a porch swing hanging from the rafters, hanging ferns brown with the cold but clearly tended, clearly loved. The siding white and clean, the shutters forest green, warm yellow light in the windows. Stone chimney putting up a thin ribbon of smoke into the purple dusk. It looked like something from a magazine. It looked like everything her father had ever wanted it to be and never had the money to make happen, and it belonged to someone named Holt. Fear sat in the truck, her leg hurt, her ear made its particular silence. She thought, I should leave. I should drive back to Billings and get a motel room and call the Jaggy office in the morning and handle this through proper channels like a rational adult. She thought, that's the smart thing, the measured thing. She put the truck in park, got out, walked toward the gates. She made it approximately 20 ft up the gravel driveway before the front door opened. The woman who came out was maybe mid-30s, dark hair pulled back, jeans and a thermal shirt and work boots that had actually worked. She moved the way people move when they've been physical their whole lives, not trained physical, lived physical. The kind of strength you build hauling feed and fixing fences and doing 100 nameless tasks a day that add up to something real. She also had a Remington 870 leveled at Mara's chest. Mara stopped walking, assessed, grip tight but stance too wide, shoulders up near her ears, frightened, determined, the combination that made people unpredictable. Not dangerous unpredictable, cornered unpredictable. A woman protecting something she loved, scared, and scared people with 12-gauge shotguns required a very specific kind of attention. That's far enough, steady voice, barely I can see that. Mara kept her hands visible, relaxed, not raised. Raised would be theatrical, would escalate, just visible and open and very, very still. I'm not armed, I don't know that. No, Mara agreed, you don't a beat. I'm going to need you to turn around and get back in your truck. I understand that's what you'd like. Mara looked at the house, then back at the woman. But I need to explain something first, and I'd appreciate it if you'd hear me out before you make any decisions. You have about 30 seconds. My name is Mara Callaway. Father was Frank Callaway. This land has been in my family for 3 generations. I left 10 years ago when my father died, and I've been serving overseas. I believe there's been a serious mistake with the county records. Silence. The Remington didn't move. Then from behind the woman, a voice, older male, calm in the way that very tired people are calm because they've used up all their available alarm. Rennie, put the gun down. The woman, Rennie, turned her head slightly, kept the barrel pointed. Dad, put it down. A long beat. Mara watched the calculation happen on French's face, then the barrel dropped. She engaged the safety, didn't put it away, leaned it against the door frame where she could reach it. Smart. Mara respected that the older man stepped onto the porch. 67 maybe, silver hair, a carved walking stick taking some of his weight on the left side, weathered face, the outdoor kind. He looked at Mara with pale blue eyes that gave nothing away, nothing, which told her everything. He wasn't surprised to see her. He had been expecting her. She filed that away immediately, the way she filed everything that didn't fit. The inside was worse than the outside, not worse bad, worse devastating, because the layout was exactly as she remembered it. Central staircase, living room left, kitchen back. The bones of the place she had grown up in completely unchanged beneath everything else. And everything else was beautiful. Warm pine-colored walls, hickory floors dark and gleaming, new windows, and actual functioning fireplace instead of the gas insert her father had installed in 1994 and never cleaned. The smell, wood smoke, something roasting, coffee from that morning still faint in the air. Mara stopped in the doorway of the living room. Her mother's rocking chair was by the fireplace. She hadn't thought about that chair in years. Cherry wood, her grandmother's before her mother's. When Mara left at 17, it had been in the corner with one runner snapped, gathering the particular dust of things nobody can bring themselves to touch. She had left it. She had left everything. She had walked out the door with a duffel bag and not looked back. The chair had been restored, the runner repaired seamlessly, the wood refinished to warm honey. A hand-knit blanket draped over the back in cream and soft blue. Something happened in Mara's chest, sharp, quick, gone before she could name it. Found it in the back of the barn. Rennie's voice behind her, quieter now, the defensive fire still there but something underneath it. Guilt maybe, or just discomfort. It was too beautiful to leave. My dad fixed the runner. Mara looked at the chair for another moment. It was my mother's, I know. I mean, I didn't know that. I could tell it was old. It looked it's fine. Mara turned away from the chair because if she kept looking at it, she would feel the thing in her chest again, and she didn't have space for that right now. I'm not here about the chair. She crossed to the couch and sat down, not asked, just sat, took her jacket off. Clasped her hands in front of her and looked at Rennie Holt with the patient stillness she had learned in 18 months of surveillance work in places where patience was the difference between mission success and everyone dying. Show me the paperwork, she said. Rennie showed her the paperwork, thick manila folder, county seals, signatures, the whole official architecture of a legal transaction, every page in order. Mara read it slowly, methodically, not for the obvious, for what was adjacent to the obvious, thing that wasn't wrong but wasn't quite right. She found it on page 4, the tax deed transfer. Dated June 14, 2019, proved by Judge Harlan Price, Gallatin County District Court. Mara looked at the date, held it in her mind, June 14, 2019. Her Deere's account had been frozen on March 11, 2019. A suspected identity theft flag, standard procedure, cleared within 90 days. She remembered it because she had been trying to send money to her cousin Billings for a car repair and the transfer had bounced. 3 different offices, 6 phone calls, 11 days before the hold was even acknowledged, 985 days between the freeze and the approval. The tax deed approved while the disruption in her account was still fresh, still visible to anyone who knew how to look, which meant the person who filed the report with the county, the report claiming she was presumed unreachable, had been watching. Had known exactly when her financial visibility went dark, not an accident, a window deliberately used. Mara set the folder down on the coffee table, carefully aligned the edges. Do you know the name Gareth Solis? Rennie frowned. No, he was my father's attorney, managed the estate when my father died. I hired him when I enlisted. Mara kept her voice even. He was the only person outside the military who had access to my financial records. He was supposed to ensure the property taxes were being paid. The county said they never received payment. I know. Mara looked at the date again, then at Walter Holt, sitting in the armchair by the window, holding his coffee mug in both hands, watching her, still not surprised. They wouldn't have because the money never got there. Rennie crossed her arms. So your lawyer stole from you? That's between you and your lawyer. It is. Mara nodded. Except this document was filed 95 days after a freeze on my account that any county clerk doing due diligence would have identified as a routine military finance hold. And the timing tells me that freeze wasn't random. Someone was watching for it. Silence. What are you saying? Rennie's voice had gone careful. I'm saying this wasn't incompetence, Mara said. I'm saying someone made a choice. Walter Holt set his coffee mug down. The sound was very small in the quiet room. There's a law, Mara said. The Service Members Civil Relief Act, federal statute. It prohibits foreclosure, tax sales, or any legal judgment against the property of an active duty service member while they're deployed in a combat zone. The county was not legally permitted to sell this farm. The silence that followed was the silence of a room where everyone is doing rapid and terrible math. Rennie looked at the hickory floors. The floors she had installed herself on her knees, board by board, over 3 weeks in spring when the weather broke and the grief was eating her alive, and working was the only thing that helped. $150,000, $3 years of her life, purchased with the one asset she had left after Cade died, the insurance money. The money she hadn't wanted to touch because touching it meant admitting it was real, that he was really gone. We have nowhere else to go, Rennie said. Her voice was steady. She was not going to let it be anything else. I'm not here to put you out, Mara said. I need to see the original paper filing at the county records office. The digital version has already been altered. Rennie's eyes sharpened. Altered how? There should be a notation on any tax deed involving military property. A Square Review flag. It's not in the digital record. Walter from his chair. The records office closes at 5:00 on Fridays. Mara looked at him. He met her eyes without blinking. Today is Wednesday, he said. You have 48 hours. She called the JAG office from the truck, 7 minutes on hold. Lieutenant Commander Patricia Voss picked up, thorough in the way of people who cared about getting things right. Mara liked her for exactly that. She explained the situation in 90 seconds, flat, factual. Voss was quiet for a moment. The Square protection is solid. If you were deployed in a combat zone, I was in Kandahar, then the sale is legally void. But you need the original paper filing. If the digital record has been altered, the paper record is your only clean evidence. County Records Office. Gallatin, get there before anyone might want to stop you figures out you're looking. I know. Is anyone else aware you've made this connection? Mara looked at the farmhouse through the windshield. Warm light in the windows, the silhouette of Rennie moving in the kitchen. 2 civilians, she said. The current occupants, are they a problem? Mara thought about Rennie's face when she understood what the timeline meant, the way her jaw had tightened, not with anger at Mara, with something else. The same cold, useful focus Mara felt when a mission suddenly became clear. No, she said, I don't think so. He slept in the truck, not uncomfortable. She had slept in worse places on worse nights. She reclined the seat, put her jacket over her shoulders, and was asleep in 4 minutes. 5:00 in the morning, the farmhouse dark, one light in the kitchen. Walter, she had clocked him as an early riser. The kind of man who'd been up at 4:30 for 50 years and saw no reason to stop. She got out of the truck. The cold hit immediately, that bright, clean Montana bite. She breathed it in and let it sharpen everything. Front door opened. Walter came out with 2 mugs, set one on the porch railing, looked at her, didn't say anything. Mara walked up the steps, took the mug. They stood in the pre-dawn dark, steam rising from the coffee, and didn't speak for a long time. Owl somewhere in the tree line, the distant sound of cattle, the quiet of a working farm before the day starts. Finally, Walter said, Your father came to see me the night before he died. Mara looked at him over the rim of her mug. Pale eyes were on the middle distance. There's something you need to know, he said, about what happened here before you make any decisions about this land. A pause, before you decide what you think you're owed. The coffee was strong, the cold was everywhere. Starts with a man named Cade Holt, Walter said, my son-in-law, Rennie's husband. His voice was the steadiness of a man who had rehearsed this sentence inside his own head many thousands of times and was finally saying it out loud. He died in October 2013 on this farm because of your father. The cold went somewhere deeper than skin. Walter told her all of it. October 17, 2013. The cold had come too fast that year, unseasonable freeze after an unseasonably warm autumn. The irrigation canals along the south edge of the Callaway property backed up in ways nobody had predicted. The lower 60 acres were flooding. Frank Callaway was watching years of recovery dissolve into standing water. Mara could feel this part in herself. She knew what her father looked like when things fell apart. She knew the specific shape of his desperation, the way it made him reckless, the way it made him reach for solutions that weren't solutions. He drove to the equipment yard of Pendleton and Sons, 2:00 in the morning, brought bolt cutters, cut the padlock on a Caterpillar excavator, a 1998 model that had been tagged out of service 6 weeks earlier. The hydraulic locking mechanism on the boom arm was failing. Red padlock on the ignition, maintenance tag on the door. Frank cut through both. He was going to dig a diversion trench, save the lower field, return the machine before anyone noticed. Cade Holt had been driving home from a late job in Bozeman. He saw the excavator on County Road 9, recognized it, his father-in-law's machine, technically. Cade ran the equipment yard. He knew every machine on the roster. He knew that one specifically. Knew it had been pulled because the boom arm could fail without warning under load. He pulled over, got out, tried to flag Frank down. Frank didn't stop. So Cade climbed up onto the track assembly, trying to reach the cab, trying to tell Frank, stop, get out, the machine isn't safe. Frank saw him on the tracks, panicked, swung the cab, the hydraulic lock gave out, the boom arm dropped. Mara stood on the porch of her family's farm in the 5:00 dark and listened to Walter Holt explain how her father had killed his son-in-law. And she did not move, and she did not speak, and she kept her hands very still on the porch railing, because if she moved her hands, she would feel how badly they were shaking. Cade Holt was 30 years old. He and Renee had been married 2 years. The county ruled it an accident. Frank had claimed he didn't know the machine was tagged. Pendleton and Sons had liability issues of their own, an inadequately secured equipment yard, no perimeter fence. The district attorney declined to prosecute. 2 weeks later, Frank Callaway died of a heart attack in his sleep. The town said it was the stress of a bad year. Walter knew what it was. He couldn't live with it, Walter said, not cruelly, just accurately. Some men can't. Mara stared out at the dark fields, her father's fields, the ones he had almost saved and destroyed himself in the saving. Now green and thriving and belonging to the family of the man he had killed, she had spent 10 years thinking her father was a victim of bad luck. She had spent 10 years being angry at him for dying. She had not known what he was actually carrying. I need to be alone for a while, she said, controlled, the voice that gives nothing away. Walter nodded like he'd expected this too. She walked down the porch steps, through the gate, got in the truck, pulled out of the driveway and drove north on County Road 9 until the farm was behind her and there was nothing in any direction but open field and the gray pre-dawn sky and mountains that didn't care about any of it. She parked. Off they turned off the engine in Syria. An IED had thrown through a wall and she had not cried. In Ramstein, a doctor had told her the hearing in her left ear was permanently compromised and she had not cried. In the VA office in Billings, 24-year-old administrator had lost her paperwork twice and made her wait 4 hours and she had not cried. She sat in the truck on a gravel pullout on County Road 9 and thought about her father, not the man she had been angry at. The man Walter described, the man who had driven to someone's house in the middle of the night to say, I did this, I cannot undo it. The man who had 4 days between that confession and his death and had apparently spent them alone. She pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes. Freed, the mountains were starting to show against the sky, that first thin line between dark and darker. She had come here thinking she was owed something, and she was. The law was still on her side. Gareth Solis had still betrayed her, the county had still failed her, those things were all true. But there was a woman inside that farmhouse who had lost her husband on this land, and there was a man on that porch who had looked at her without surprise, who had carried 2 mugs, who had been expecting her. She needed to understand that. She started the truck, drove back. The Gallatin County Records office smelled like old paper and institutional carpet cleaner and fluorescent lighting at 8:00 in the morning. Mara had been in worse places. Clerk behind the counter had reading glasses on a beaded chain and a cardigan the color of oatmeal and an expression that said she had seen everything this county had to offer and found most of it mildly irritating. Nameplate, Darla Fitchish, 22 years. Walter had said it like a warning. Mara treated it like intelligence. She approached the counter alone. Rennie stayed by the door. Two women asking questions looked like a delegation. One woman looked like a citizen exercising a right. Good morning, flat, polite, not warm. Darla looked up over the glasses. Help you? I need to access an original paper filing. Tax deed transfer June 14, 2019. Reference TDT 2,010,614 MC. She slid a handwritten note on the counter with the number, then her military ID, then her discharge papers. Then a letter citing the statute number. Darla read it, set it down. You know the digital record is available online. I need the original paper filing. We don't typically, I know. Mara kept her voice patient, all the urgency underneath, none of it visible. But the statute I've cited allows a service member to request access to original physical documentation in cases involving property rights. I'm not asking you to do anything outside your purview, Ms. Fitch. I'm asking you to do exactly your job. A long moment. Darla looked at her over the glasses. Mara looked back. It'll take a while. Records from 2019 are in the secondary archive. Basement. I'll wait. Could be an hour. I'll wait. Darla picked up the letter, read it one more time, then put it in a tray on her desk with the deliberateness of a woman doing something because the statute required it, not because she enjoyed being cited at. Sit down, she said. Mara sat. Music. Rennie brought coffee from the gas station across the street. She handed Mara a cup and sat in the plastic chair beside her, and they both looked at the counter and waited. 3 chairs, all the particular shade of blue that exists only in government buildings, a water-stained ceiling tile, a voter registration poster. She doesn't like you, Rennie said quietly. She doesn't like being cited at. Did you have to cite her? Probably not. Mara sipped the coffee. Terrible. She drank it anyway, but we have 41 hours. Rennie looked at her watch, then out the window, the restlessness of a person who needed to be doing something and was currently not doing it. Can I ask you something? Rennie said yes. When did you know that the timing was wrong? Page 4, the date on the approval, and you just. Rennie stopped. You read a legal document for the first time and caught something my attorney missed. Your attorney wasn't looking for it. Were you? Mara thought about it honestly. I was looking for anything that didn't fit. Rennie was quiet for a moment. Cade used to do that, she said. Not to Mara exactly, more to the air in front of her. Walk into a job site and know in 30 seconds what was wrong. What was going to go wrong? A pause. It drove the crews crazy, because he was always right. Mara didn't say anything because some things don't need a response, they just need to be received. He would have liked you, Rennie said. Then, like she hadn't meant to say it, never mind. He would have told me I was wrong about something, Mara said, and then been right. Something shifted in Rennie's expression. Not warmth exactly, something adjacent to it. The look of a person who has been braced for a long time and has just for 1 second forgotten to brace. 53 minutes later, Darla Fitch came back from the basement. She was carrying a gray archival box with both hands and a carefully neutral expression, because neutral was not what Darla Fitch's face did naturally. Darla Fitch's face did opinionated, mildly irritated, thoroughly unimpressed. Neutral required effort. An effort for a woman who'd been doing this job 22 years meant something in that box was worth having an opinion about. She set it down, lifted the lid. I need to note for the record that I'm required to log any access to original physical documents, of course, and that the log will show this is the first time this file has been accessed since it was archived. Mara looked at her. How long has it been in archive? Since 2021. Standard 2-year rotation. A pause. The digital record shows 2 amendments, both in 2021. Before the physical file was rotated to archive, has the digital record been updated since? A pause that answered the question before the words did. I'm just a clerk, Darla said. I log access. I facilitate retrieval. She slid the box forward. I don't draw conclusions, and went back to her desk and did not look at them, which was itself a conclusion. Mara put on the archival gloves Darla had left on top of the box. Of course, Darla had left gloves. 22 years. She opened the file, went through it page by page, methodical, the kind of slow that wasn't slow at all on the inside. Every unit of attention. She had page 3. A notation in the upper right corner of the SCRA review checklist, in pencil. The pencil notation read, SCRA status, active military review required. Over the pencil notation, someone had stamped the word waived in red ink. Besides the stamp, a signature. Mara looked at the signature, then at the other signatures throughout the document. The stamp's ink was a slightly different shade of red. The signature moved differently from the others, tighter, more deliberate, like someone copying rather than signing. She took out her phone, photographed every page, then she looked at Rennie. "I need a name." "What name?" "The clerk who processed the 2021 amendments. The one who put the waived stamp on a notation that should have triggered a mandatory review." They both looked across the room at Darla Fitch, who was typing at her computer and absolutely not watching them. "I think," Rennie said slowly, "that Darla Fitch has been waiting a long time for someone to come in here and ask exactly that question." They were right. The clerk who had processed the amendments was a man named Perry Stoll. 11 months in the records office, 2020 to 2021, to pursue other opportunities. "Where?" Mara asked. Darla typed something on her screen. "He currently works as a paralegal." A pause that carried everything. "At the law offices of Garrett Solis LLC, Bozeman." The room was very quiet, so that was how. Solis hadn't done this himself. He'd had someone inside, someone who knew when specific files moved from active to archive. Someone who could add an amendment, add a stamp, add a signature in the 18-month window before the physical file was buried in the basement and the digital record became the only version anyone would ever look at. It was almost elegant. It was the kind of plan that worked perfectly until someone came back from Syria and read page 4. "Ms. Fitch." Mara said, "Yes, I'm going to need a certified of the original physical file, all of it, notarized attestation that it represents the unaltered document." Darla looked at her. "And I need it in the next hour," Mara said. Darla took the gloves off the counter, put them on. 45 minutes, she said, and went back to the basement. They were in Rennie's truck in the parking lot when Mara's phone rang. A new number, Montana area code, Ms. Calloway, a man's voice, smooth, the voice of a person who had practiced being smooth for decades into something that sounded almost like sincerity. "My name is Garrett Solis. I believe we need to talk." Everything went very still. Mara looked out the windshield at the parking lot, at a woman loading grocery bags into a Subaru, at the ordinary Wednesday morning of Gallatin County. "How did you know I was here?" "This is a small county, Ms. Calloway. I have clients." A pause. "I understand you've been accessing some records. I have the right to access records pertaining to my own property." "Of course you do." Warm, reasonable, the voice of a man not worried or performing not worried well enough to convince himself. "I'd like to meet and explain some things. There was a complicated situation with your father's estate. I tried to reach you multiple times. You filed a report with the county stating I was presumed unreachable." Brief pause. "There were communication challenge, Miss Garrett." First name, deliberate. "I have the original paper filing. I have photographs of a pencil notation marked wave by a man who now works in your office." She let that settle. "So you can explain things to me in person or you can explain them to the FBI field office in Billings. Either way, I'm going to hear an explanation." 4 seconds. "I'll be in Bozeman tomorrow morning," Mara said. 9:00. She hung up, put the phone in her pocket. "He called you," Rennie said. "Not a question. He knows I'm here." "Does that change our timeline?" Mara thought, fast and clean. Solis knew she had the file, knew she had connected Perry Stoll. He would be calling someone right now, someone who could tell him exactly how much trouble he was in, what he didn't know about the letter. Frank's letter, the receipt. "It accelerates it," Mara said. "I need to get back to the farm." "Why?" "Because there's something in that barn I haven't shown you yet." The back barn, the section on the west end that Rennie hadn't gotten to yet. No budget left, structurally sound but empty, just old framework and rotted shelving. Mara pushed the door open, cold air and old wood and the smell of time. She walked to the west wall, ran her hand along the shelving, not looking for what was there, looking for what was missing. Her father had built these shelves when she was 8 years old. She remembered watching him measure twice, cut once. He had been meticulous about that, and at the end of the far shelf where it met the wall, he had left a gap. She had asked him about it once. He had said, "Every structure needs room to breathe." She pressed the back panel where it met the wall, found the edge, got her fingernails into it, pulled. The panel came away with the soft resistance of wood fitted carefully and left undisturbed for years. Behind it, space, 8 in deep, 12 wide. And in the space, a manila envelope, not yellowed, protected by the panel. Frank Calloway had known how to build things that lasted. On the front, his handwriting, blocky, careful. The handwriting of a man who had gone to a one-room school and taken penmanship seriously his whole life. Mara, when you come home, she stood there holding it, her breath visible in the cold. Behind her, Rennie had gone absolutely still. What is that? Rennie's voice. Quiet, I don't know yet. Mara looked at her own name on the envelope. He had believed she would come back. He put this here and believed that someday she would find it. She had taken 10 years. She hoped somewhere that was okay. Let's go inside, she said. Walter was at the kitchen table. He saw the envelope in Mara's hand and something moved through his face. Quick recognition, or relief, she couldn't be sure which. She sat down, set the envelope on the table, looked at it. Then she opened it, 2 items inside. The first was a letter, 4 pages handwritten. She read it slowly because it deserved to be read slowly because he had written it that way. The handwriting starting careful and getting more unsteady as the pages went on. The words of a man who had been holding something for weeks and was finally letting it go and couldn't quite control how it came, told her about the accident, all of it. More Walter had told her. The specific detail of that night, the irrigation water rising, the decision that had felt in that moment like the only possible choice, the sound, what he saw, what he did after. He told her he had gone to Walter's house at 2:00 in the morning, sat at Walter's kitchen table, probably the same table, and confessed everything. Asked what he could do, Walter had told him to go home, that what was done was done. Told her he had gone to get the solace the next morning, needed to know his legal exposure, whether he would go to prison, what would happen to the farm, what would happen to Mara. Solis had told him the accident as described did not meet the threshold for criminal prosecution. The equipment yard had liability issues of its own. Frank's best option was to say nothing and let the county investigation conclude what it was going to conclude. And then Solis had said one more thing. He said, that kind of advice, the kind that stays in this room, costs a little extra. Frank had paid him $9,000, everything left in the operating account after the flood damage. I told myself it was for you, Frank had written. Maybe it was, I don't know anymore. Think maybe I was scared. I think maybe I just didn't want to find out what happened to me. I'm trying to be honest about that. I'm not sure I'm succeeding. Come home someday, Mara, fix what I broke. You were always better at fixing things than I was. She set the letter down. Her hands were steady. She had made them steady. It took effort. She was choosing not to know how much the second item was. A receipt, cash payment, $9,000, dated December 4, 2013, signed Gareth Solis, attorney at law, for services rendered. The specific language of a man who kept records because records were leverage and leverage was the point. He had given Frank a receipt because a receipt meant Frank knew Solis had the money, and Frank knowing that meant Frank would never talk. Except Frank had put the receipt in an envelope in a wall he built with his own hands and trusted it to the daughter he believed would come home. Mara looked at Walter. He was looking at the receipt. You knew he went to Solis, she said. I knew he went to an attorney. I didn't know what was said. Walter's voice carried the weight of a man who had lived with incomplete information for 11 years and had just had the gap filled. I didn't know about the payment, but when the farm went to auction, when you saw the filing date, you connected it. I had a theory, Walter said, and you said nothing to who, just the question, honest and simple, to the sheriff. On the basis of a theory about an attorney who had every legal right to manage a deceased client's estate, he set his hands flat on the table. I'm 67 years old with a bad leg and a widowed daughter and no evidence. What exactly would you have had me do, Mara? She didn't answer because the answer was nothing. He couldn't have done anything, not without this. She picked up the receipt, looked at it. This was the flaw in Gareth Solis's perfect system. He had given a frightened old farmer a receipt because he liked having records, because records meant control, because he had never once considered that the frightened old farmer would put it in a wall and wait. Rennie had been very quiet. Mara looked at her. Rennie was staring at the letter, at Frank's handwriting, at 4 pages of a man trying to be honest at the end of his life. He was sorry, Rennie said, not to Mara, not to Walter, just said it. He went to someone's house in the middle of the night to say he was sorry. Her jaw tightened. It doesn't bring Cade back. No, Mara said, it doesn't, nothing does. Her voice was not breaking. It was the voice of someone who had already broken and come back and was not going to do it again in front of someone she'd known for 36 hours. But he tried, Mara agreed. The kitchen was quiet. Outside, the cattle made their distant, indifferent sounds. The wind moved through the pines on the north ridge, the afternoon light turning the snow on the Beartooth Range pink and gold at the edges. Solace is expecting me tomorrow, Mara said. 900 Bozeman. She looked at Rennie, then at Walter. I want to meet him in person. I want him to see the receipt and understand exactly what's about to happen. And what is about to happen? Rennie said. I call the FBI field office in Billings. I report a pattern of fraudulent property transfers targeting active duty military personnel. I provide the evidence. She paused. Solace goes federal. Perry Stahl goes with him. Judge Price gets investigated. She looked at them both. The tax deed gets voided. She said, this farm legally reverts to my name. Rennie looked at her, and then Rennie said, and then we talk about what happens next. What has happened next? Mara looked around the kitchen, the hickory floors, the stone fireplace, the cherry wood rocking chair visible through the doorway. The window above the sink where the afternoon light came in at an angle that made the whole room warm. Her mother's house, Rennie's home. I don't know yet, Mara said honestly, but I don't think either of us has to figure it out alone. Garrett Solis had his office on the 3rd floor of a building on Main Street in Bozeman, clean brick exterior, brass nameplate by the door, recently polished. The kind of detail that told you something about a person. They cared about how things looked from the outside, had spent considerable energy making sure the outside looked exactly right. Mara sat in the parking lot for 6 minutes before going in, not hesitating, thinking objective. Assets, possible responses, exit strategies objective, make Solis understand the dimensions of what he was facing. Assets, the certified copy of the original paper filing notarized by Darla Fitch. The photographs, Frank's letter, the receipt, and the name Perry Stahl, which she hadn't yet used out loud to anyone outside the farm. Possible responses from Solis, denial, deflection, legal threats, or the one she was hoping for. The particular silence of a man who realizes he has been outmaneuvered and is calculating his next move. Exit strategy, walk out the door. She got out of the truck. Rennie was parked 2 spaces down. They had not discussed whether she would come into the building. They had not needed to. Rennie had driven her own truck and parked 2 spaces down and was sitting there with her jaw set the way it got when she decided to do something. You don't have to come in, Mara said through the window. I know. This could get, I know what it could get. Rennie got out. Good jacket, the dark one, like she'd dressed for something that mattered. Cade's name is going to come up in there. Yes, then I'm coming in. Mara looked at her for a moment. Okay, she said, and they went in. Solace was 60 years old and looked like someone had designed him to inspire confidence in people who weren't paying close attention. Silver hair, good suit, the handshake of a man who had practiced handshakes. His office had framed degrees on the wall and a view of the mountains and a desk that was very clean in the way that said the real work happened somewhere else. He stood when they came in, looked at Rennie. Something moved across his face. Quick, not surprise. The adjustment a chess player makes when an unexpected piece appears on the board. Ms. Calloway, he gestured to the chairs. I didn't realize you'd be bringing someone. This is Rennie Holt, Mara said. She has an interest in this conversation. He sat smooth, unhurried. I think there's been some misunderstanding about the handling of your father's estate, and I'd like the opportunity to, before you say anything else, Mara said. I want to show you something. She opened the folder on his desk. Certified copy, the notarized attestation, page 3, the pencil notation, the saw flag, the red stamp. The 2 careful signature Perry Stahl. Mara said. Solace looked at the document, didn't touch it. He worked in the county records office from 2020 to 2021, said. He currently works here as your paralegal. She let that sit for 2 seconds. The handwriting on this signature doesn't match any authorized county employee. The ink on the stamp is a different shade. This is the original physical file, not the digital version amended in 2021 before the physical file went to secondary archive. Solace was very still. I also have this. She set Frank's letter on the desk, then the receipt. $9,000, December 4, 2013, his own signature. The room was completely quiet. Solace looked at the receipt for a long time. When he looked up, the smooth voice was still there, but something underneath had changed. Miss Calloway, I understand how this might look. It looks like fraud, Mara said. You filed a false report with Gallatin County stating I was presumed unreachable when you had legal access to my military records and knew I was active duty deployed in a combat zone. You used a contact inside the county records office to falsify documentation and suppress a mandatory SCRA review, and you did it while in possession of a $9,000 payment from my father in exchange for your silence about a death you were legally required to report. She paused. That's compounding a felony, that's fraud on a government office, and depending on what the FBI finds when they look at your other clients, those are federal charges. Solis was quiet, then Rennie spoke. She had been still this entire time. Stillness of someone who has been holding something for a long time and has finally decided where to put it down. You took his death, Rennie said. Quiet, completely level. My husband died on that land. He was 30 years old trying to help an old man get out of a broken machine, and you took that fact and put it in your pocket and used it to make sure no one would ever ask the wrong questions. She looked at him directly. I'm not asking you to answer for that. The law will figure out what it can figure out. She stood, picked up her jacket. I just needed you to hear it from me, out loud, in a room where you can't pretend it didn't happen. She looked at Mara, stood. You're going to tell me, Solis said carefully, that you haven't called the FBI yet. No, Mara said, I haven't. So there's room for a conversation. There's room for you to call them yourself. She looked at him. Before I do. A long silence. That's not a negotiation, Solis said. No, Mara agreed, it isn't. He called his own attorney first. Predictable. She had predicted it. She and Rennie sat in the waiting area outside his office while he made the call. The low murmur of his voice through the door, but not the words. Fine, she didn't need the words, she needed the outcome. Rennie sat with her hands folded in her lap. Are you okay? Mara said. No. Rennie looked at the wall across from her. Are you no good? A pause. I'd be worried about you if you were. Mara looked at her. Kate always thought people who were fine all the time were lying about something. Rennie said, not sad, just true. He wasn't wrong, he usually wasn't. A breath that was also irritating. The door opened. Some of the smoothness had gone out of Solis, not all of it, but enough that the edges showed. I'll cooperate, he said, with the FBI investigation. Full cooperation. I'm not a prosecutor. Mara said, I can't offer you anything. That conversation is between you and the U.S. Attorney's Office. She stood. Full cooperation is noted. You'll want to document that. She walked to the door. Rennie followed. They were in the hallway waiting for the elevator when Rennie said, that's it, that's it. It felt. Rennie stopped. I thought it would feel bigger. Mara looked at their reflections in the brushed steel elevator doors. Two women in good jackets, one with a bad leg, one with a wedding ring on her right hand. It never does, Mara said, the moment of it. It never feels as big as what came before. The elevator opened. They got in. What comes next? Rennie said. I make the call to Billings. Mara watched the numbers descend. Then we go home. The words sat between them. Home. Neither of them said anything about it, but neither of them looked away from it either. The FBI field office in Billings took the call at 11:47. Special Agent Dana Corliss, patient voice. The kind of patient that came from years of listening to people say difficult things and knowing that hurrying them made it worse. Mara gave her everything. Chronological, evidence referenced, 13 minutes, no editorializing. Corliss was quiet for a moment. Ms. Calloway, are you aware of the Service Members Property Protection Initiative? No, it's a federal task force active since 2020 looking at patterns of fraudulent property transfers targeting active duty military. A pause. The name Gareth Solis has come up before. Different context, different state. Everything in the truck went still. How different? Mara said. Can't discuss an ongoing investigation. But what you've described, the timeline, the methodology, the county records connection, it's not the first time we've heard this pattern. Another pause. You may have just given us what we needed to connect several cases. Several, not one, not two, several. Mara stared out the windshield at the parking lot, at the brass nameplate on Solis's building visible from here, catching the noon light gleaming, looking exactly right. How many? She said, we've been looking at 3 other properties in Montana and Wyoming, active duty owner, similar timelines, similar filing irregularities. Corliss's voice was precise. If your evidence connects them, it will. Mara said, not with heat or certainty for show. The way she said things she knew to be true because she had checked them against reality and they held. Perry Stahl entered a proffer agreement this morning. Corliss added, he's cooperating fully. The document falsification, the amendments. He's given us dates, methods in 3 other instances we hadn't found yet. Is he going to be charged? That's for the U.S. attorney to decide, but yes, almost certainly. Good, Mara said, not with satisfaction, not with anger. The clean finality of a door closing on something that should have closed years ago. I'll need you to come into the office. Corliss said, this week if possible, bring everything. Thursday, 9:00, I'll be here. She hung up 3 other properties, 3 other families. 3 other people who had gone away to serve and come back to find something wrong. All of them tangled up in the same smooth-voiced man with the clean desk. Rennie was watching her. How bad? Rennie said, bad enough. Mara put the phone away, findable now because of the receipt, because of your father. Mara looked at her. He kept the receipt, Rennie said, not accusing, not forgiving, just accurately. He put it in the wall. He was the reason this works. A long moment. Yeah, Mara said, quieter than she intended. He is. They drove back to the farm in separate trucks, 2 hours on I-90 West and then the valley and then County Road 9. Mara followed Rennie's tail lights the whole way. Not because she needed to, just because she found herself not wanting to be the one in front. Walter was on the porch when they pulled in. He had known to be there, the way he always seemed to know things slightly before they happened. Like he had been calculating probabilities for so long he'd gotten very good at the math. He looked at their faces. Done, said. Done, Mara said. He nodded once, the nod of a man receiving news he had waited for and wasn't going to make a production of. Come inside. I made soup. The soup had been going since morning. Chicken and root vegetables and something herby that filled the whole kitchen. Cornbread in the cast iron skillet with a dish towel to keep the warmth. They ate. Nobody spoke for a while, the fire going in the living room. The cherry wood rocking chair catching the light. Outside, the late afternoon sun turning the bare-tooth snow colors that had no names. I need to tell you both something, Walter said. He set down his spoon, folded his hands, looked at his soup, then at Mara, then at Rennie. When the farm went to auction in 2019, I knew the address immediately, recognized it. I looked up the filing, saw the date, thought about what I knew about Frank and what he'd paid Solace for. He paused, and I made a calculation. Dad, Rennie said, careful. Like she could feel where this was going. Looked up your service record, Walter said to Mara, what was publicly available, your deployment status. I knew you were alive, I knew you were active duty, and I knew the sale was wrong. The kitchen was very quiet and I let Rennie buy it anyway, Walter said. Rennie went still. Not because I wanted to take something from you, he said to Mara, and not because I wanted Rennie to have something she didn't own. He looked at his daughter. Because she needed something to fight for. After Cade, she was disappearing. And I thought if she had this place, if she built something here, then when you came back, he looked at Mara again, there would be something worth coming back to and someone here who understood what it cost. The fire crackled. You used me, Rennie said. Her voice was very even. I gave you a reason to get out of bed every morning for 5 years, Walter said. I am not sorry for that. I am sorry I didn't tell you why. A long silence. Rennie looked at her hands, at the silver ring on her right hand, the one she'd moved from her left to her right 2 years after Cade died, because she needed to acknowledge that something had changed without pretending it was gone. You could have just told me, she said. You would have argued, Walter said. I argue about everything. Yes, Walter said, which is why you're still here. Something crossed Rennie's face, too fast to name. She looked at the ceiling, then at Mara. Did you know? She said. No, Mara said. I figured it out last night. The way he looked at me when I arrived, he wasn't surprised. She paused, but knowing he planned it doesn't change what he was planning for. What was he planning for? Rennie said. For someone to finally have enough, Mara said. Evidence. Reason. Someone who couldn't be threatened into silence. She looked at Walter. You needed 2 of us. You alone couldn't take on Solace, and you knew I'd need someone who knew the county, who had reason to care about what happened to it. Walter looked at her for a long moment. You would have made a good engineer, he said. I would have made a terrible engineer, Mara said. I have no patience for levels. Rennie made a sound. It was almost a laugh, almost. The conversation about the land happened after dinner, not dramatically, not with ultimatums or tears. At the kitchen table, with the remains of supper between them and the fire going low, the way the most important conversations happened when everyone was too tired for theater. The sale, Mara said. Legally, the property reverts to me. I know, Rennie said. The FBI investigation will likely result in civil recovery proceedings against Solis, which means there's a process by which you could recover some of what you invested. Not all, but some. I know that too. It takes time, and it doesn't give you certainty. Mara looked at the grain of the table. Hickory, probably. Someone had carefully. I don't want to take this place from you. I think there's another way. Rennie waited. A joint LLC, Mara said. Callaway Holt Agricultural Trust, 50-50 ownership. You and Walter manage operations. I handle capital investment and structural maintenance. She looked up. My disability pay and the VA injury settlement, I have enough to cover what the farm needs for the next several years, and you have what I don't have, knowledge of this land, the relationships. Rennie looked at her father. Walter was looking at Mara with the expression of a man doing careful math. The south cabin, Mara said. I'd like to restore it, live there. A pause. That's acceptable. You want to live here? Rennie said, testing the sentence, seeing if it held weight. Yes, why? Mara thought about it honestly. Because I spent 10 years going to places that needed me, she said, and I came back to a place that maybe needs me too, differently. She paused, and because I'm tired, and this is the only place in the world where I have ever felt like I belonged, even when it was falling apart. Another pause, especially when it was falling apart. Rennie was quiet for a long time. 50-50, she said. 50-50, you don't make any livestock decisions without consulting me. I wouldn't know where to start. You tell me before you make any structural changes to the main house. Of course, and you don't disappear, Rennie said. If you're here, you're here. Mara looked at her directly. I'm here. Rennie extended her hand across the kitchen table. Mara took it. They shook. Walter produced 3 glasses from somewhere and poured whiskey into them without asking, and nobody said anything about it. 3 weeks later, the south cabin. Walter had been at it since 7:00 in the morning. Structurally sound, Walter had been right about that, but the interior needed everything. New insulation, window seals. The wood stove needed a new flue liner and a damper that actually damped. Walter handed her things and told her where to put them. She handed him things and didn't tell him where to put them because he knew. They worked in a comfortable silence that had developed without either of them deciding to develop it. The kind that meant 2 people had figured out how to share space without explaining themselves constantly. You ever going to tell me what you did in the Navy? Walter said at one point. No, Mara said. Fair enough, Walter said and handed her the drill. At noon, Rennie came down from the main house with lunch. She did this every day, not because Mara couldn't feed herself, because Rennie had decided it, and Mara had learned that when Rennie decided something, the efficient choice was to accept it and redirect energy elsewhere. Darla Fitch called, Rennie said, handing Mara a sandwich, and she wanted to know if you were going to need anything else from the records office. A pause. I think she likes you. Darla Fitch doesn't like anyone. She specifically asked if you were planning to stay in the county long term. Mara thought about this. I'll send her a thank you note, she said. She'd probably prefer a certified filing request, Rennie said. I'll figure something out. Walter made a noise that was definitely a laugh, and for a moment, just a moment, Mara looked at the 2 of them, an old man with a bad leg handing her a drill. A woman who had pointed a shotgun at her chest 5 weeks ago, now bringing her sandwiches. And she thought this is what home looks like when you come back to it broken and find that it was also broken, and that somehow the breaks fit together, not perfectly, not easily, but well enough. The call from Special Agent Corliss came on a Thursday, 5 weeks after Billings. Mara was on the roof of the south cabin checking the flashing around the chimney when her phone buzzed. She climbed down carefully. Her leg in cold weather required negotiation. She answered, Ms. Callaway, I have an update. Gareth Solis had entered a cooperation agreement with the U.S. Attorney's Office. Full disclosure of all transactions involving military-owned properties going back to 2015. Perry Stahl had provided a written statement corroborating the falsification of the Gallatin County filing. Judge Price retired, spending his evenings watching television and not thinking about the things he had signed, was under formal investigation by the Montana Judicial Standards Commission and the 3 other properties. One owner had given up and moved away. One was in a legal dispute that had gone nowhere for 2 years. One had died not from the loss, but she had died not knowing what had been done to her. Her daughter had been notified. "You brought us," Corliss said. "The receipt, the paper filing, the Perry Stahl connection, it's the thread we needed. It ties everything together." A pause. "Your father kept very good records." Mara stood in the yard of the south cabin. "He did," she said. "The civil recovery process will take time," Corliss said. "Legal framework for restitution is complex. I can't make promises about timelines or outcomes." "That's fine," Mara said. "I'm not going anywhere." She hung up, stood in the yard. Rennie was coming down the path from the main house. She had seen Mara on the phone and knew. She always seemed to know when something had shifted. "Corliss," she said, "Solis took the cooperation agreement. Perry Stahl is testifying. Price is under investigation." Mara looked at her. "And the other families are being notified." Rennie exhaled long and slow. "It's not over," Mara said. "It'll take time, but it started. Rennie looked at the main house, at the barn, at the fields running out toward the mountains, brown gold in the winter light, but still somehow full of the summer that had been. "Cade would have wanted this," she said. "Not the outcome, the trying." She looked at Mara. "He always said it mattered more that you tried than that you won. Was he right?" Rennie thought about it. "Ask me in a few years," she said, and walked back to the house. Day they hung the sign was a Saturday in late January. The ground was frozen and the sky was the flat white of a Montana winter, smelled like snow before noon. Mara had ordered it 3 weeks earlier from a woodworking shop in Livingston. Cedar, hand-carved letters, the kind of thing that would outlast all of them. She and Rennie and Walter stood at the end of the driveway. Mara had the post-hole driver. Her leg objected to the vibration. She worked through it without mentioning it. Walter supervised because he was 67 with a bad leg of his own and had earned the right. Rennie held the sign. She had been quiet all morning. The processing quiet that Mara had learned to read over 2 months. Something settling into place in the person needing space for the settling. They set the post, tamped the frozen earth. Rennie hung the sign, stepped back. Oak Ridge Callaway and Holt S. 2025. Below it, smaller in the same careful carving, Whispering Pines. Because the name Rennie had given this place was part of what it was now, part of the 3 years she had poured into the soil. "You didn't erase that, you added to it." They stood there in the cold, the 3 of them. "Cade would have hated the font," Rennie said. Mara looked at her. "He had opinions about fonts," Rennie said, "very specific ones, something about serifs." She paused. "I never entirely understood." "It sounds exhausting," Mara said. "It was a breath, small. I miss it." The wind moved through the pines on the north ridge. The cattle made their distant sounds. The snow on the Beartooth Range was doing something pink and gold at the edges, even under the flat winter sky, which shouldn't have been possible and was anyway. "Come on," Walter said. "Coffee's getting cold." That evening, Mara built a fire in the main house. Rennie was at the desk going through supplier invoices. Walter was in the armchair with a book he had been reading for 3 weeks and showed no signs of finishing. The cherrywood rocking chair by the fireplace was empty. It was often empty, but it was there, restored, present, doing the quiet work of being beautiful in a room that needed it. Mara went to the shelf above the fireplace. She had brought 2 things from the truck. First was a photograph she had found during the estate resolution process. A photograph she hadn't known existed until a paralegal handed her a box of unclaimed personal items that had been sent to storage for 11 years. Frank Callaway, young, maybe 30, standing in front of this house when the house was new and everything was possible and the future was not yet the shape it would become. He was squinting into the sun, not quite smiling, but close. She set it on the shelf. Second was a photograph Rennie had given her without being asked. Just handed it to her in the barn the week before while they were both doing other things without making it a moment. "I have copies," was all she said, and went back to what she was doing. The photograph of Cade Holt standing on this porch looking out at the fields, half-turned like someone had called his name and he was just beginning to look. Mara set it on the shelf next her father, 2 photographs, 2 men, both of them gone in ways that were connected. both of them present in the people they had left behind in the land they had touched badly and well in ways that couldn't be undone. She stepped back. Rennie looked up from the desk. She looked at the shelf for a long time, then she looked at Mara. She didn't say anything, but her eyes said, "Yes, that's right, that's where they belong." Walter looked up from his book, looked at the shelf, looked at both of them, then went back to reading, which was how Walter expressed approval. He stopped watching because he no longer needed to. The fire crackled. The Montana night pressed against the windows the way it did, heavy and absolute and full of stars you couldn't see through the glass but knew were there. Outside snow had begun to fall softly, the first real snow of the season. The kind that came quietly and covered everything and made the morning look like something new. Mara sat down in the chair nearest the fire. Her leg ached. The cold always found it. It would find it for the rest of her life, probably. The physical therapist's voice in her head, 6 months to functional, 12 to full weight bearing. She had made it in 4. She had stopped going to appointments, but here, for the first time, she thought maybe she would go back. Not because she couldn't manage alone, but because managing alone had been the whole point for so long that she had forgotten it wasn't the only option. "I need to make a doctor's appointment," she said, to no one in particular. "I know a good one in Livingston," Rennie said, not looking up from the invoices. "You've been waiting to say that, for about a week." "Yes." Walter turned a page. Mara looked at the fire, at her father's photograph, at Cade Holt's half-turned face, at the cherry-wood rocking chair, restored and still and holding the warmth of the room the way things do when they've been loved back to wholeness. She had come home expecting ruins. She had found something so much harder and so much better than ruins. She had found people who had been living in the space her absence left, who had made something of it, who had built something real on land that had every reason to be nothing but grief. She had found her father's voice in an envelope in a wall. She had found a woman who fought for things with her bare hands and called it ordinary. She had found a man who made 2 cups of coffee before dawn because he believed in being ready. And she had found, underneath all of it, the thing she had been running from when she left and running toward without knowing it through 10 years of deserts and compounds and missions that had no names. She had found home, not the home she had left. Something harder, one, something that had cost everyone in this room more than it should have, something built on loss and error and the stubborn refusal of broken people to stay broken. But home, the snow fell, the fire burned. And Mara Calloway, 28 years old Navy SEAL veteran, bad leg, one good ear, sat in her mother's house and breathed, for the first time in 10 years without waiting for what came next, without scanning the horizon for threats, without calculating the fastest route to the nearest exit. She was just here in a room with 2 people she had known for 2 months and felt like she had known longer in a house that was hers and theirs and neither and both. On land that carried more history than any piece of ground this size had a right to carry somehow held it all without collapsing. Rennie looked up from her invoices. "Hey," she said. Mara looked at her. "Thank you," Rennie said, simple. No further explanation, no qualifying, just the 2 words, said the way people say the things that mean most, quietly, like they're not trying to make a point because the point has already been made. Mara looked at her for a moment. "Don't thank me," she said. "We're 50-50. Rennie almost smiled. Time finally. She let it happen. Outside, the snow kept falling and the mountains stood in the dark the way they always had, enormous, holding everything the way mountains do, the way home does when you finally let it.